So if you ever see anyone out there successfully start and grow a nonprofit, I guarantee you they've made a ton of mistakes along the way, but maybe we're not talking about that enough. Starting a nonprofit will make you humble, that is for sure. This video won't be the first time that I've talked openly about my own mistakes or things I wish I'd done differently in my own journey starting and leading a nonprofit. But since I left my role over a year ago as executive director for the nonprofit I started, I've had some more time to think. So I wanted to share a few more things that I regret doing as a nonprofit leader, things that I would definitely do differently if I could go back in time now, in the hopes that they will help you in your own journey to start, grow, or lead a nonprofit. So I'm going to talk through 5 of the major regrets that I have looking back at my time leading a nonprofit. And for each, I'm going to share what I did, the thing that I regret, what the consequences were, and then what I would do differently today. And I've saved my biggest regret for last, so make sure to watch to the end to hear all about that one. Okay, this first regret is a big one. Please don't do this. Here's what I did. I underestimated the cost of running a nonprofit big time. Nobody teaches you how much goes in to running an effective organization. In fact, there's a huge misconception out there that running a nonprofit basically costs nothing. Oh, just get everything donated, people say. I truly wish it were that easy. As some say, nonprofit is just a tax status. It's not a business model. You still have to run the organization like a business in many regards. First of all, you can hope people donate, but you can't force them to. You have to inspire them and give them a good reason to donate, especially since we have hundreds or thousands of nonprofit in any given city that people or businesses can choose to support instead of your organization if they want to. But secondly, not everything even can be donated. For example, insurance. No insurance company is donating insurance coverage to your nonprofit. I can promise you that. Or like your required annual fundraising permits, your state's Secretary of State isn't giving you any discounts on those. So I certainly started my organization with the misconception that we'd be able to get most, if not everything, donated to us, that the costs to run an actually effective organization were little to none. But the consequence is that this belief held our organization back and prevented us from growing and serving more people. Because I underestimated costs, when I went to create our annual budget with our team, we didn't account for things that we might need to invest in or build infrastructure, stability, or quality programs. Things like a decent website, bookkeeping services, or marketing materials. It turns out that if you don't have a decent website or marketing materials, people have a harder time finding your nonprofit. And if they do find you, they may not take you very seriously if your website looks like it's from the early 2000s. And if you don't invest in accounting and bookkeeping, your finances can be scrutinized by the public or the IRS, and managing them poorly can get your nonprofit shut down. Then you're not helping anybody. It's important to take investments like this seriously because they will give your organization a return on that investment. For one, you'll be able to attract supporters more quickly, which means you can serve more people. For two, it can be highly worth it to pay someone else to focus on things like accounting so you can focus on your mission. When we first started out, I did all of our accounting. And while it was good for me to know how to do that, I spent hours doing that could have been spent on our mission work instead. So what I would do differently today is do a lot more research and get really clear on the true costs of running a nonprofit, from infrastructure like software and insurance to staffing to marketing like a good website and materials that look professional enough to earn you credibility with strangers. But knowing your true costs is just one thing. You also want to avoid my next regret. My second regret is starting way too many programs and projects at once. I know, we all have a million ideas, and it feels like a betrayal to ignore one idea instead of try to implement them all. I did not do that. Instead, every time I had a new idea for a project or a program, I immediately went to work launching it. I had shiny object syndrome for sure, but that had several really bad consequences. For one, launching so many ideas in too short a time was extremely stressful on my board of directors, volunteers, and the few staff I had as we were growing. They got whiplash every time I came up with a new idea, and I wasn't doing a great job of including them in conversations about developing these ideas either, so that's like a second part of this regret. As the founder, I would often just sort of charge forward with whatever I came up with. And later I would learn from my team that this made them feel like we could never take the time to get really good at one or two things, that we were stretched so thin that we ended up doing things half-assed. But another consequences was funding was harder to obtain. You'd think that if you have so many projects or programs, the funding would be easier to get, but actually the opposite is true. Why? Because when you have so much going on, a few things happen in a funder's mind. One, your work starts to look so complex that they can't figure out what you're actually doing. And two, funders question your credibility and effectiveness. They can see clearly that if your organization doesn't have the systems and staffing in place yet to run several programs well, that it may not be running them well at all. So what I would do differently today is take some time in the beginning to run a few very small scale experiments with different program ideas, and then kind of figure out what works well from those. And then I would double down on the ones that are working and hone a couple of programs before trying something new. I would also develop a process to work with my board and team to evaluate and work through new ideas to see if they're worth pursuing and what kinds of resources would be needed to pull those ideas off well. But the thing about programs is you need something else to make them work really well, which brings us to my third regret, not spending enough time honing our message. When I first started my organization, I assumed everyone would instantly get it, that they would understand our glorious mission, why it was so important, and instantly rush to support it. But what I didn't think about at the time was that most people don't understand most social issues out there. It's part of our job as nonprofit leaders to inform and educate so that we can help people understand why they should care about and support our work. When we first started, we created language and a mission statement that was so long and convoluted that people just lost the thread. I found myself frustratingly trying to explain what we did to strangers as their eyes just glazed over. The consequences for not spending more time honing a clear message are huge. If people don't clearly understand what you do in 10 seconds or less, they're much less likely to want to support your organization. So here's something to think about. Have you ever gone to a nonprofit's website and read about their mission and it sounded something like this? Our mission is to catalyze a multi-sectoral, evidence-informed ecosystem of asset-based capacity amplification among economically marginalized populations through participatory, equity-centered interventions that operationalize cross-disciplinary frameworks for sustainable socioeconomic mobility. Do you have any idea what that means? Most people don't. In the nonprofit world, sometimes we have a tendency to try to use fancy words or sound credible, but the truth is it backfires big time, because how can you feel inspired to support a cause if you don't even understand what that cause is? So what I would do differently today is this. I would write out a one-pager with talking points about our organization, including our mission statement, the problem that we're tackling in society, program description, and how people can help. Then I would review it heavily with people smarter than me who are not yet familiar with my organization to get their take on it. I would ask them, did they understand it instantly? Which parts were the most confusing? And then I would rework it, making it as jargon-free and simple as I could. Then I would test the updated version with other people again and keep refining it until it's crystal clear. Now, messaging is critical, but there's something else I wish I'd done differently that would have accelerated our growth as a new nonprofit also. Which brings me to my fourth regret: delaying setting up team training and onboarding processes for our board and staff. Now, I can hear you thinking, team training, that sounds like a problem to tackle once you're more established. But I actually disagree with that sentiment based on my experiences not doing this soon enough. So early on, when starting and growing my organization, I was focused on just getting as many people to participate in whatever projects or programs I launched as I could. I was thinking a lot less about, as I mentioned, the true costs I'd need to plan for, the messaging, and as we're discussing now, training and onboarding people on my team. And the consequences were many. From a program's perspective, I'd have a decent amount of participants or volunteers in my programs at first, but then because we lacked a consistent, high quality experience, many people wouldn't come back a second or third time. From an outreach and fundraising perspective, bringing in new board members or staff without leading them through meaningful training or onboarding meant that these new people were kind of thrown into chaos and unsure of their roles and responsibilities from the starting point. They hadn't gotten training on how our programs worked, how to talk about our organization or our internal processes, all things that slowed us down a lot when we were trying to operate day to day. Just imagine having to stop your work on your mission every week to explain something to a team member. Failing to train your team when they first start means confusion, frustration, delays, and things being done incorrectly. Now, eventually, years later, I did work with my team to create process documenting and online and offline training programs and content for new board members and staff. But I know if I'd done that earlier, we'd have been able to grow a lot faster. So here's what I would do today instead. First, I would be documenting everything. I would document how programs work, how internal processes like managing our accounting or renewing our insurance, for example, work, how we recruit volunteers, all of it. Then I'd create a board and staff training program as early as possible. I would create a first generic training about our organization, its programs, basic processes for everyone, then create specialized trainings for different groups like board members or volunteers helping with marketing, etc. I would combine online and offline training opportunities to make sure that they really stick. I would also think about building a calendar of ongoing trainings throughout the year because people need refreshers sometimes. Plus, these opportunities can help people work together more effectively. And finally, I would think about building a pipeline of leaders earlier, people who have already been trained, at least a little, on our organization who can step into leadership roles when and if a current leader leaves, which is going to happen. One day, your top board member or volunteer will move on to something else, so having a trained pool of candidates ready to step up can be really helpful for continuity of programs and operations. For example, you might create an advisory board for your organization consisting of people with different skills and talents who offer input to your organization a few times per year, and then recruit future board members from this group. Now, in a moment, I'll talk about my biggest regret of all. But first, I want to thank the sponsor of this video. Starting and growing a nonprofit can feel overwhelming, as we've been talking about, but Click and Pledge makes it easy for nonprofits to start strong and scale with confidence and empower their volunteers to help raise money for their cause too. With Click and Pledge, you'll get professional-grade tools for super affordable startup-level costs from day one. They've got customizable donation forms that you can plug right into your website, creating the foundation of a strong online fundraising strategy early on. But Click and Pledge also has a number of other tools included in their affordable flat monthly costs that you can use as your nonprofit is growing, from in-person and peer-to-peer fundraising features to video fundraising with embedded donation links to text-to-give tools to donor management, Salesforce, and other integrations, all included with no contracts or surprise add-on fees. Unlike some platforms that increase your fees as you grow, Click and Pledge pricing stays the same whether you have 10 donors or 10,000. So you can use the QR code and link in the description to check out Click and Pledge, book a demo, and get your first $25 monthly fee waived. All right, I've arrived at my fifth and final regret, and looking back, I do think it is the biggest one that I have. It's setting a bad example by overworking myself. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a bit of a recovering workaholic. While running my organization, I once had a stretch where I didn't go on a vacation for about 6 years. Think about that. 6 years with no meaningful time off. But here's my biggest lesson learned about that. You would think that the only person that this hurts is yourself. But it turns out that when you're a leader of other people, that's not how that works at all. First of all, you get cranky when you don't take a break, and that just sucks for everyone around you. But secondly, what I started to hear from people on my team who were thankfully willing to tell me the truth is that when I don't take a break, it signals to everybody else that they can't take a break either. I was setting a bad example, not a good one. One of the worst things you can do as a nonprofit leader is contribute to burning out your people. Your people are your organization's most valuable asset. Things don't run without them. Programs and services, operations, outreach, fundraising. It's too much to do by yourself. You need people around you to help, and you need to take good care of those people. So if I had to do this all over again today, I would institute policies that not just allow, but encourage breaks and time off for my team. And eventually, we created a flexible, unlimited paid time off policy for our staff and paired that with our operations manager checking in with people to make sure they scheduled their vacations so they wouldn't forget. Secondly, I would make sure that your board takes breaks too. Your board of directors are volunteers, most likely giving time outside of their day job, and they can get burned out too. So eventually we scheduled a long break over the winter holiday to enforce and enable some time off for the board too. Then third, I would design a work schedule and cadence that balances sustaining your services for your community with navigating around those breaks for your team and volunteers. You can't serve anyone well if you're burned out. All right, look, here's the thing. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as nonprofit founders, change makers, and community leaders. We forget that we're human. So I want to say that the best thing you can do when starting out is give yourself time and space to experiment in small ways, figure out what works, and be open to failing and learning along the way. Not only is it inevitable, but failing will make you a better founder, leader, or whatever role that you're aiming for. The big secret is that this stuff is hard. If we don't fail or make mistakes sometimes, we don't get a chance to learn what really makes the biggest impact. If you want more support as you're starting or building on your efforts, I share additional strategies and resources every week in my free newsletter for nonprofit leaders and changemakers. And I will share the link to subscribe to that below. And it's also on my website, changemakercafe.com. In the next video, we're going to talk about different types of nonprofit grants that you might find today and where to start looking for them. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I'll see you next week. Bye.